Because if we're going to make any kind of systemic change, it's not a one person, it's not a one person race. There's a really incredible.
It's a team effort. It's
100%. And I've had a couple of people, like men who follow the work that we do, have reached out. Are you getting teary?
A little bit.
Oh, it was so beautiful.
Hey guys, Jason Witten here, your host of The Wealth Faculty, and in this episode I'm joined by Nicolle Edwards, the founder of RizeUp Australia and New Zealand, and what a conversation, absolutely amazing. What a lady, giving, creating something special for people who can't do it themselves. I'm blown away by this interview. I even get a bit teary in this one. It's deep, it's meaningful. The true meaning of wealth really in this conversation for me is about when you have enough for yourself, dig deep and start to give to those who can't take care of themselves. And really inspirational conversation. What a lady. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
Hey Nicolle, welcome to the podcast today. Thanks for joining me.
You're so welcome. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so
really fancy little setup.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a nice little spot here.
Yeah, you do. It's good.
Mm-hmm. So listen, we're going to have a bit of a chat today about something that you've been working on, very passionately, full time for 6 years.
Yeah.
RizeUp, and we'll sort of talk about that a little bit later on in detail. But tell me, 6 years ago, I was reading some information about you and where this started.
Yeah.
Let's dive straight in. What was the fork in the road for you 6 years ago? What triggered this thing for you?
Do you know what? I think, Jace, it goes further than that.
Yeah.
Right? And I think very early on in our lives, we are set to a dharma, right? And I was born in a place that at the time was called Rhodesia, and it's now Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe, yeah.
And we moved down. My dad had been in the war for 10 years, and we moved down to Durban when I was 2. And we lived in Durban then until I was about 10 years old. And we actually then emigrated to Australia.
All right. Formative years for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we emigrated. My brother was 13. And at the time, conscription was 15. Right?
Wow.
So obviously Dad had a terrible time. He was in the war for such a long time, and he'd seen and...
Did he volunteer or was he conscripted?
He
went. Okay.
Yeah, fought for 10 years, yeah. So it was a heavy time, and I think it was that time when Dad was like, we need to get out. I don't want this for my boy.
My family,
yeah. So we came to Australia with $25,000 in the bank. He's got 2 small children and on a temporary visa. My dad is a legend. And, if you think about that, there's no certainty and you've just packed up and left and come to the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And but in that time, Jace, I always felt, I had this feeling in my tummy. It was like this fire, around injustice, and I didn't know. And I've done a TEDx and everything, and I sort of
great TEDx
through all of that.
Yeah.
But it was always, at 6 years old and whatnot, you don't really know what that is. You don't know why you're feeling a certain way. And I always felt that there was something I couldn't put my finger on. And obviously it's a reflection on my parents and the way I've been brought up, right? But there was definitely that racial injustice.
Right.
And at that young age, you don't really know. You don't know this is your normal,
you're in the environment. Yeah.
In the environment. And I talk about this story that is really... it's a really pivotal moment in my life. We were away on holiday and we were sitting in a booth waiting for breakfast, and in the neighbouring booth there was a couple of adults, and there was a African man that was lining up and he was getting his his breakfast, and I noticed at the neighbouring booth that they were laughing and making fun of that African man.
Right.
And I couldn't understand why, because he's no different to us. And as that young, you can imagine, we've all got kids, and imagine those little kids and, what goes through their mind. And that was that, as I got older, Jace, I really started to feel and recognise that fire and that rumble in my tummy is actually injustice. It's when I can recognise any type of injustice. Even when I went through school, if someone was being bullied or something, it would just make me crazy.
Yeah.
And I guess it was longer than 6 years ago, but it was at a time when it came to my attention that there was a lady that had arrived at the Gold Coast Hospital, and she had her baby and her 3 other children. And she had jumped on a train in Perth, Jace, and she'd crossed our beautiful country and she'd landed on the Gold Coast.
What was that, 2 or 3 days on a train?
Yeah, and all she had was a backpack.
Wow.
Right? And what she'd done was she had essentially taken the children to lunch. That's what she had told the perpetrator of the violence, but she had essentially crossed this country to get to safety. Now, to me, that's unfathomable, right?
Right.
And, I got a bit of a reach out from people that I knew and, Nick, do you have anything? What can we do? We've got this lady at the hospital, blah, blah, blah. And so just very quickly, I put a call out on social media.
So this was sort of, hey, can you help out?
Have you got something?
Right.
Mate, do you have something?
Yeah.
And so I put a bit of a call out, and by the end of the first week, Jace, we had almost housed her.
Wow.
So that was just that.
So from your network, so hey, listen, help out.
Hey, what have you got? What have you got?
Yeah.
And so that was really incredible to me because I felt like, gosh, people are just so generous and they were so ready and willing to jump in and actually do something. And I feel like that. I feel like people sometimes just need to be asked, right? Because they just need to be shown the way or there is a bit of trepidation, hesitation to step into a space that's unknown.
Or help someone facilitate how they can help because sometimes that feels overwhelming or where do I start, right?
Where do you start? Yeah. And I think the important thing there is you just start. You just take one step. People often say to me, did you imagine that RizeUp would be as massive as it is?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't think we ever go into anything thinking that we're going to do a half-assed job. Yeah? We're going to go into it. We're going to give it everything we've got. And we're going to change endings. We're going to change lives and we're going to make this better. How can it not grow and get bigger?
How can it? So when did you know that part for real? You're saying, okay, when even from a young age I had this burning something and maybe you couldn't even recognise or language what that was. And as you matured, this gave you an opportunity maybe to sort of open that Pandora box and wow, there's some energy in here that I can use for good.
Yeah, but I think it wasn't even a conscious decision.
Right.
It was an unwitting, what else would you do?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
So, I did that and then I started having conversations with refuge staff. And you've got to remember that the domestic and family violence space, you can't just Google, there's a refuge at the end of the street.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's not public knowledge, right? So you got to...
Because it's essentially people are in hiding.
Yeah, gotcha. Wow.
So, just through kind of word of mouth, people started to know, Nicolle, can't she help with this? And
so you helped one time.
Yeah, helped one time. Started having conversations.
Talking in the network and then people say, well, Nicolle's in the know.
Yeah, well, I think it was more around tipping my little toes in.
Right.
Because asking questions, I'm a sponge for information.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Started having a few conversations and very, very early on, the next house that came up, the next family, that we needed to help, it was like nothing. We were old mate. Like there's no organisation.
Yeah.
It's just, hey, you were able to get some stuff. Could you get some more stuff? And and I remember going to this house, this little unit, the very second family that we helped. We walked up it was myself and it was a friend's hubby, I think was helping me at that time. And he had a ute, so we just were dropping some stuff off, So the mum was there and her little boy, right? We walked up the stairs in this rundown, place where this woman now was. And I walked in and there in her apartment was nothing apart from, do you remember those bad 1970s wicker furniture? The kind of the lounger and that's made out of bamboo.
Bamboo stuff,
Bad printed.
Yeah, everyone had those, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, so poor thing, she had this, right? It was dirty. In the master bedroom, there was a single bed with no pillow, no linen, nothing, right? And the little boy was 4 years old and she had nothing, Jace. Nothing. this is Australia. This is on the Gold Coast.
Right.
So I walked in there and I scoped it out very quickly. We dropped off, what we needed to drop off, give her some linen. We had another bed. The little boy was sleeping on that bed and she was on this tiny little bamboo. It wasn't very comfortable, but she felt really, she wanted her son to have the bed, and there was no blankets, nothing. And what really struck me at that point, Jace, there was a couple of things, right? One, how is this sustainable? She's going back.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a roof and she's away and she's, she might be safe.
What other choices does she have right now? Yeah. Yeah.
She had been there for 7 days with nothing.
Wow.
Nothing, Jason. This drives me nuts. And all I could see was that without a shadow of a doubt, she's going back.
Right.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
This is, and she shouldn't have to live like this. We live in a first world country, right?
Yeah.
And I think that coming from Africa, and obviously Gareth, and he's from Africa, and we ended up meeting here and whatever, and but we are both so enormously passionate about what's happening right here.
Yeah. It's under your nose, right? It's like, it's in your neighbourhood, it's in your friendship
100%.
circle, it's in your business,
But no one
wherever.
knows.
No one knows, yeah.
No one knows.
Yeah, the silent suffering.
Yeah, no one knows. I think when we look to overseas and we can see, we come from Africa, we know it. We know crime, we know third world, we know injustice over there, right? But for us to sit in the lunky country, okay, and to now know the extreme levels of violence and disruption and trauma and devastation that is happening with our young people and our families.
Yeah.
I just think if more people knew about that, Jace, we would all be up in arms, I tell you.
Do you think it's something like sometimes it's easier to acknowledge that stuff when it's at a distance and not so close to you? So, personally, reading some of this stuff and also experiencing it because, I've known you for a while and, and supporting multiple causes, like sometimes it's that discomfort and almost you want to turn away, you want to ignore it because it's too much or it's full on or whatever, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's not very sexy, is it, Jace?
No.
Like it's not, seeing images of beaten up women and it's horrific.
Yeah.
But what we do know, right, Jace?
Yeah. What are some of the stats in and around this stuff? Like so
1 in 4 Australian women are living in or have experienced domestic and family violence. 1 in 3 Australian women have, since the age of 15, have experienced intimate sexual violence. Indigenous women are so many times more likely. In Australia, we have 3 women a week are hospitalised due to traumatic brain injury, Jason. 3 women a week, traumatic brain injury. Police are called out every 2 minutes in Australia for a domestic violence incident.
And there's probably more, right? Because that's just the ones they're called out for. Yeah.
The other thing is, today we're sitting in our 29th week of 2020 and 30 women have been killed already this year.
So just with the times at the moment with Corona, has that had a major impact from, I heard a lot of information about, it's made things worse because people are together more often at home. Yeah. And
if you can imagine at a time when we are being forced to stay together because it's a place of safety and that, it's the best way to be, it's the best place to be, is to stay at home and to stay away. There's the threat of the virus and everything. And, what's happening is really vulnerable people are being locked at home with perpetrators of very serious violence. And, it's harrowing. Our job load has increased by 28%.
Really? Since the Corona times? Yeah.
So I think it's... it's massive and challenging times. We're sitting at a time now when we have over 400 volunteers, 465 volunteers.
So now with your organisation, 400 volunteers
so
across.
We fast forwarded and
across. Well, it's so that second person, that second family that you helped. Was that trigger point where you said, "Listen, someone's got to do something about this," and it should be me? So because we were chatting before, and you said you and Gareth decided to stop your business. You had a very successful business.
We only did that maybe 4 years ago.
Got you.
Down.
Yes.
So up until that moment, and it definitely wasn't that point where you go, someone's got to do something about it and it's me. It's not that, right? Because I'm a really massive believer in the collective.
Right.
Because if we're going to make any kind of systemic change, it's not a one person. It's not a one person race.
Yeah.
There's a really incredible.
It's a team effort. It's
100%.
It's a community effort, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, there's an incredible African proverb that I love, and you might know it. If you want to go fast, go alone.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go far, go together. And with an issue as heavy as domestic and family violence, there's only one option.
Yeah.
We have to go together.
Have to go together.
We have to go far.
Yeah.
So, it's just always been, and I even say this to my team now, it's, yes, I might have, had the decision and started having the conversations. But in terms of having a really successful team, I think, I might have the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Right? But if I didn't have the wheels or the window screen or the window wipers or the whatever, the nav man, we wouldn't be going anywhere.
The people around you to have such a massive impact. And your the vision for what you foresee this being able to be, facilitated, spreading it through the community and going the distance, like that's going to take some people, some resources, some effort, some sustained,
And I think the thing is, for me, the goal that I have for RizeUp is that we are the Australian response, the men's and women's voices against domestic and family violence.
Yeah.
Australia's revolution against violence.
Yeah.
So I hope one day when people hear the name RizeUp, it's synonymous with a revolution against domestic and family violence, and that's our goal.
Yeah.
And the work is very, very important. And I guess, one of the earliest things that I found was, I'm not a social worker, Jace, right? I'm sales and marketing old mate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So all right, let's solve this with some marketing or whatever, how do those skills for you now have transferred into this sort of stuff? Obviously, running a business has given you some leadership skills, vision, budgeting. I'm sure you have to manage resources, all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's around connecting your passion, right, with what connecting your passion and your skill base. So just because you're in sales and marketing, for example, doesn't mean that you can't step into this space, or, we have to allow ourselves to give ourselves permission to venture and do different things and make sure we're filling up our buckets, filling up the people around us.
Yeah.
Life is too short, Jace. That's kind of where I'm at. You mentioned
short.
Gareth and I had shut the business down and whatnot, because I was sort of doing this and Gareth was traveling and we got to that point where we were like, the need is massive, and he is so passionate about everything that we do together, and I couldn't be as successful as I am without this incredible man. He is the best human I know. And, we've been together 20 odd years now.
Awesome.
Yeah. And, he's incredible. And if anyone sees the families, because, we don't meet the families that we help and that we support. I always prefer the word support over help,
Yeah.
And, we don't meet these families, and, but sometimes when Gareth's out there in the truck, he's, we'll, go in and there's a woman there and he's just dropping some things off, and the kids, and he's seen, Gareth's got some incredible stories.
Yeah.
And it just, he doesn't like public speaking or anything, that's kind of my lane,
Yeah. And he's a back of house guy, is he? Yeah.
He really is. And but he's just beautiful. We do a bit of work with the unions, and there's nothing as intimidating as going into a group of 150 high-vis.
Yeah.
And just having a chat about domestic and family violence.
Yeah. And how does that stuff go for me? I'm, genuinely interested in that stuff because, as a man myself, obviously, when I hear these things, I find it almost unbelievable. Like it doesn't even come into my sphere as in my personal sphere. But but certainly, those conversations, charged in all sorts of ways, how do you facilitate those conversations, and how do the men take them? Like, I'm
So I think the biggest thing, right, is we have to be really clear around what the issue is.
Yes.
Okay. And the issue is, in Australia, we have a massive problem with men's violence across the board.
Yes.
Okay. So men are at greatest risk from violence from other men, usually strangers, and that violence usually occurs in a sporting environment, at the pub, in those kind of social environments.
Yep.
Women and children are at greatest risk of violence from men and men that they know.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Right.
So the commonality there is the fact that it is really gendered. Now, it's a really tricky thing.
Conversation. Yeah.
Because for many people, they will say, what about the men? 100%. You never say because something's gendered that men aren't impacted by domestic and family violence, or that women aren't capable of inflicting domestic and family violence.
Sure, yeah.
But the research is heavily underpinned by statistics. All right? 98% of all emergency intakes, it's coming through domestic or family violence.
Yeah.
The statistics are horrific, all right? So just putting that just on the table, okay? The other thing is that we don't say it's gendered to minimize or negate a man's experience of domestic and family violence. We're here to promote the importance of respect for communication and managing our microcosms, and no one deserves to feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Okay. And domestic and family violence, and the fact that it thrives in our community, Jace, is because it is underpinned by gender inequality. Okay. So, Gareth often says, there's always some sort of language around, she's a feminist, or so, all of this horrible language.
Yeah, just give me some definition around that inequality. Is some of this stuff, economic as well, sort of,
100%.
economic abuse as well as physical abuse, like,
Of course.
some context in that space?
So domestic and family violence is broad.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's spiritual, sexual, emotional, physical, obviously. There are so many different components.
Right.
Okay. And when we're talking about gender inequality and what role that plays, okay, we live in a society that doesn't make it easy for women to return to the workforce after they have children.
Yeah.
Childcare is too expensive.
Well, I read a stat, I'll probably quote it wrongly, but the most people affected right now in job loss are women. And
of course,
in the corona times, and the childcare issue. So,
Absolutely. So I think it's really important that if we are going to influence long-term and embrace long-term systemic change, we really have to understand and allow ourselves to lean into the complexity of what are the drivers to violence against women?
Yeah.
What's happening? Why have 30 women been killed this year?
Is there any, I don't know if you guys have, that research statistic stuff, like, what are some of the things that, maybe as a neighbour, a friend, a father, a person in the community, what can we look out for, and what can we do? What could I do to help in that way? Like, are there three things, or, do you know what I mean? Because people listening in would say, well, that's awesome. Like, what could I do?
So I think that the thing that we can all do, right, whether you're a man or a woman, is be able to feel comfortable around respectfully holding our friends and family accountable for their attitudes and behaviours.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to allow ourselves to go, you know what, actually we have a horrific issue with lives that are being lost, and long-term trauma, and children's futures being disrupted. What is it that I can do? Right, I'm going to call out the funny in a sexist joke. I'm going to ask, why is that funny? Right? And the reason why we do that is not to belittle the person that is saying it.
Yeah.
It's around being able to drive a little bit of awareness around the impact, the long-term impact that will have for women. Okay?
Yeah.
There's the most incredible YouTube I must show it to you. There's an incredible YouTube clip called Dear Daddy. Have you seen that?
No.
Jace.
Write that down.
Holy moly. It's come out of Switzerland, and it's spoken in this little girl talking to her dad, right? It's insane. You've got to watch it. But essentially, that's really, really important. The reality is that we live in a really patriarchal society.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where there's going to be change is going to happen amongst the men.
Yeah.
Right? And one of our patrons is the incredible Petro Sivanasiva, right?
Yeah, right.
Incredible mountain of a man.
Yeah.
And 5 children, married to this beautiful lady, and he's such a massive ambassador for healthy, respectful relationships.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And I often chat to him about what's happening and how does he navigate in the rugby land, and when other players and whatnot know what his views are, how does he navigate that with them? And he just says to me, they steer right clear of him because they know exactly where his line is.
Yeah.
Like amazing, right?
Yeah.
And he also says one of the biggest things for men, right, is, and something that I'd really love your listeners to take away, is that silence is collusion.
Yes. Well, it's something you're almost unconsciously trained to do. Like, and I've had these conversations. It's not your business. And I've had these conversations with many people before in my life. Certainly the darker side of sport can be a real fertile training ground for the wrong behaviour. Like that. And it's fantastic how sporting organisations are really focusing on that idea. It's just like it has to be healthy, and we, as Aussies, we love our sport. We're mad for our sport, but at the end of the day, the energy there has to be a healthy energy as well.
The culture needs to.
The culture has to change.
And it's funny that you say that, Jace. So we are partnered with Queensland Rugby League. Okay, so we have some incredible partnerships.
Yeah,
right?
That's fantastic.
And there's some naysayers out there who will go, what kind of a domestic violence service would be partnered with the Queensland Rugby League?
Right.
What wouldn't be is my question.
Well, yeah, absolutely. What a great way to, start.
Influence change. And if they're embracing us, right, and they are leaning in and happy to start having some really robust conversations, the thing that we can't forget, right, is that domestic and family violence occurs across every culture, religion, code of sport, profession. So you could be
and socioeconomics, like you say, is it the low economy people that or that
it
all the way across
crosses everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, the rugby players and whatnot, they are in the limelight all the time. They have a duty of care to behave appropriately 100%. Because they've got little people that are watching them.
Yeah, I want to be like that guy one day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And one of the things, just going back to Petro, he always says that in a locker room environment, or if you're out with your mates and, a conversation might come up, what's the best way to handle that?
Yeah.
And he always says, if you don't want to say anything, right? So, Jace, you're in a group and there's some men there and they're having a big joke about, the missus and whatever, and you don't find it very funny, but you also don't feel very comfortable to kind of
speaking up at the same time,
which is quite a common thing for men.
Yes,
I've encountered.
Yeah,
a lot of men tend to
Well, it's like, well,
interesting
what
thing.
do they do?
and they don't want to really be that guy.
Yeah.
But the best thing that you can ever do is walk away.
Walk away.
Because your absence will be felt and your message will be felt and it will be missed. When you walk away.
Yeah.
So there's so many incredible resources out there, and I think if we sit back and think that it's too difficult, it's too overwhelming, we're not going to effect change.
Yeah.
Don't allow that, right?
Don't participate.
Don't participate. But also, I think we have a duty of care to our children and our children's children. I often say we don't have 30 years to learn to put a seatbelt on, Jace.
No.
When we jump in the car,
do it right at the start.
We put the seatbelt on, don't we? We don't even think about it.
Well, speaking of, do you see any impact or change for younger generations coming through? Like, talk about breaking the cycle, or you can't teach an old dog new tricks, or any of those cliches. Do you see? Do you feel? Do you sense anywhere that the younger people are getting the message and sort of at some point we're making more impact in that space?
I definitely think yes. I feel like, we do a bit of work with the schools.
Got you.
Okay.
Yep.
It's really interesting, I should say, to go to single-sex schools and then do the same presentation with
the co-ed
both
school.
genders.
Yeah, got you.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting to see the dynamic shift. So we do a little bit of work around, behaviour above and below the line.
Yes.
What does this relationship look like? Different things like that. And horrifyingly, one day, a young guy, he was probably about 15, and we were talking about consent. Okay, the importance of consent.
Yep.
Because at 15,
Yep.
starting to drink or whatever and go out and have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And, we have one of the highest rates of dating violence in Australia.
Really?
Okay, so you've got to remember that for many young boys, their first sexual experience is pornography.
Yeah,
okay?
and it's often very violent stuff. It's 100%. Not like back in my day type of thing. You had a kiss and and all that sort. It's crazy.
So and it's and then that's the impact on young girls and young women. That's the expectation of what that experience should look like or be. And it's really terrible on all levels there. But we were talking around consent, and I think what's really important is to be able to lean in and have these really great, respectful conversations and allow kids to actually speak their truth and to feel that there's a safe environment that they can ask questions. And that's we'll get back to the sort of the union stuff. I'll have a chat
circle round.
Circle round. And this young guy, so about 15, we're talking about alcohol. Okay, so if you go to a party and a girl has a drink, okay, and she becomes inebriated and she's raped, or something like that happens, whose fault is that? So this young guy puts up his hand, which I feel is quite courageous, actually. He put up his hand and he said, well, if she's gotten herself in that position, it's her fault. Right? Hectic, because that's victim blaming. That's what we call victim blaming, right?
Yeah.
So it's not the fault of the young guy that has taken advantage of her in that situation. And he went on to say, even if she wasn't drunk, if she wasn't able to fight the attacker off, it's still her fault because she couldn't fight them off.
Is that right?
So this is a 15-year-old boy, Jace.
Wow.
So, in those moments, you really take a moment to kind of go, okay, this is hectic.
Yeah.
This kind of age group, where is this messaging coming
Where does that message come from?
Right?
Yeah, obviously.
And that's the importance where we have to see more of this in schools. It's imperative that we are out there in the schools. We're giving kids permission to learn about what respectful relationships
are.
Yeah. What is that?
What is that? And I suppose it, and probably maybe a knock-on effect thing is like, certainly if, you're uncomfortable in those situations where, people are talking about things that, aren't acceptable to you, you walk away. But, maybe even something you can take and pick up. And then it's well, if you've got children, it's probably even more important than ever to communicate and teach right from the start about what's not acceptable, in that sort of space.
And children look to their parents.
100% they do.
And, we know that the statistics that the recorded statistics are 60% of little boys go on to replicate and become perpetrators, and 55% of little girls go on to replicate the relationship they saw their mum in.
Staggering.
Right? The other thing that we do know is that which a lot of people don't know. So we know a lot about intergenerational trauma, right?
Yes.
And the impact that has, the devastation that it's happened for our Indigenous friends and the trauma that they've lived through. What we do know through trauma and the impact to the brain, Jason, okay, is that it changes the DNA.
It passes on.
It passes
on. Yeah.
So children 2 generations down will be reflecting trauma behaviour, right? That wasn't even from their lived experience. It's coming through the genes. So that's what I was going for with the whole seatbelt. We don't have 30 years to change and to learn to put our seatbelt on.
Yeah.
We are impacting future generations every single day, right? So it's our duty of care to start shaping better futures for these children. And we have so much empathy for, poverty-stricken countries and all of that.
Yeah.
But this seriously is a lucky country, and these children, I think the unimaginable violence that's happening, I think it would blow you away, Jason. It's the things that we've experienced and have heard and seen, and it's you don't even realize that it's happening here on our doorstep.
Yeah. And that's where you're passionate about bringing that to the foreground, where people can be aware of it. And, like I said, like if you're not even aware of it, like you just mosey on blindly in your day. In your bubble. Which is, that's not a bad thing. It's just what people do, right? Until they're asked to help, until they realize they could do something, until they realize, well, maybe I'm responsible too, but not in a way of over there, but I could do this with my children and teach something different to break a bit of a cycle in the future.
And join a movement. We are this. So we started, the biggest thing for me around Rise Up was we needed to talk about domestic and family violence.
Yeah.
Okay, so I come from a family where my mom and dad are still together, and, this is, and even, they don't really want to talk about it, and, people don't want to
Such
talk
a taboo subject, right?
Such a taboo subject.
Yeah.
I remember my mum saying very early on, she'd say, Nicolle, Dad and I have worked so hard to keep you from this side of life, and yet
is that right?
You are throwing yourself headlong into it.
Yeah, right.
Right? And that to me was, this is the reason why I can do it.
Yeah.
I'm in there because I feel that that's my duty of care, because, people deserve to feel safe. Every woman should feel safe in their own home. Every child should be able to, feel safe in their own homes. Gareth was doing the safety upgrades, Jace, for one of the local services. And what that looks like is actually going into a home when old mate's coming out of jail tomorrow.
Right.
She might not want to go into refuge because, she might be Indigenous, and there's a lot of Indigenous women that don't go into refuge. There's a lot of institutional trauma, residual trauma. So, many of our Indigenous community don't want to go into some kind of establishment like that. It holds a lot of fear for them.
Yep.
So they choose to not. They choose to stay at home. And old mate's coming out of jail, the perpetrator, the person using violence, he's coming out of jail, and she's at home and her children. And how do we get this house safe? So Gareth's gone in, and he's had to, in a very quick time with very limited resources, there's sort of the safety upgrade pack from the government. I think it's about $700 to, for each woman who's, linked to a service, and you can do some, lights and, locks and, it's not a lot of money, right?
Yeah. It's not a lot of dough. Yeah.
And, he's had to go in and assess, and, and this is what I often talk to around the unions is we're not there, and I'll circle back to this, but we're not there to say, all you men in the high-vis vests, you're all perpetrators. This is a men's issue, and la la la. How effective do you think that's going to be?
Yeah, we're full on deaf ears, really. Yeah.
Right? But what it is, it's around going, this is what's happening for the children.
Yes.
Okay, we have this issue, and we are in this together.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to step left of judgment, and we need to just embrace and lean into this discomfort, and the only way we're going to change it. So we talk through the lens of the children a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, when I go in.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Gareth has often said, and I'll relay stories from Gareth, right? He's gone into homes, Jason, and the commonality amongst all these homes where there's children, and I'm not talking about babies, I'm talking about sort of tweens. When you hit the house, the smell of urine. So that's a fear response, Jace. Okay, so the kids are wetting their beds, Jace. It's shit, right? I get a bit fired up.
I think a lot of people are very, very grateful you do. Because if you didn't have that passion inside, and that's probably maybe changing a little gear in this sort of thing and sort of asking, for you, how do you sustain yourself in this sort of way from an energetic point of view? It's a full on subject where
I think it's I think it's because we need to, right, Jace?
Yeah.
Recalibrate. Yeah. And it's funny, I don't often get too so emotionally connected. I've got to, it's about preservation.
Yeah.
But I think with things like that, it's so important the work we do, right? It's yes, please, thank you. It's my makeup running everywhere.
No.
Yeah, I just feel like it's really, really important that people know what's happening.
Yes.
And so we talk around that and Gareth will go in and, there's the little boy has brought his mattress into next to his sister's bed. Right.
Yeah.
What little child? Because they're terrified. And, I've done a bit of talking to the, as I say, to the unions and they're incredible, and they are massively supportive. They lean in. They get a bad rap, but they're really conscientious around. There's some incredible leaders that I've come to know quite well. And at the end of one of the sessions that we did, I'll tell you two stories. At the end of the one, I'm standing there. Now, I've just completed a presentation, okay? So essentially, old mate, talking about domestic and family violence. I know what's happening out there. It's pretty shit. And this guy comes up and he's got this piece of paper and he says to me, "Excuse me, I'm just wondering if you could tell me what number I call." And I said, thinking he might have a lounge. What do you need, sort of thing? And he said, I don't treat the missus very well and I'd like to get some help. Right? So I drove home, Jace. I drove home and I went, we are doing this right.
Yeah.
We're reaching people. And I've had a couple of people, like men who follow the work that we do, and have reached out. Are you getting teary?
A little bit.
Oh, you're so beautiful. You're beautiful. I've had men reach out. I had a guy in WA who emailed and he said, hi, watching the work that you do on Facebook and on Instagram and just want to really thank you. And he said, I'm in a relationship and it's a domestic violence relationship and I'm the perpetrator and I would like to have some help. Eye contact, right?
Yeah.
So then, my thing is I went back to him and I just wanted to really say that took a lot of courage to reach out. That took so much courage. Just reach out and ask for help. This isn't the space for us to go, what a bad human you are.
No.
And I just really took that opportunity to say, you both deserve to be your happiest selves.
Yeah.
And, congratulations for reaching out and these are the services and all of that in your area.
Yeah.
And so there's been sort of these things that have happened. At another meeting that we had, there's an older guy in his 60s and he stood up at the back of the, the group, puts up his hand and keeping in mind that I've spoken at a lot of things and you get some people,
some interesting characters, yeah.
And they, they don't like me. But anyway, and you just have to embrace it and lean in, So he goes, could I have just want to say something? And I'm like, yeah, sure, thinking to myself, here we go.
Yeah.
And he turned to the group and he said when he was little, growing up, it was nothing for him to step over his mum who was knocked out in front of his bedroom by the bathroom, he said. And he said his dad ended up killing his mum.
Jeez.
Right? So he was fired up, okay? So that's one in a group of 150. Out of that same group, there was another guy, because I was talking about the wetting the mattresses and stuff. And this guy came up to me and he said, oh, you know, when he was younger, he was about 15, and his girlfriend used to wet the bed, right? And he said that her mum was killed by her dad subsequently. So that's two men in a group of 150 who there's been a direct. So it's not fairy floss and it's not stories. It's, you know, the reality is, Jace, it's 1 in 3 Australian women have been affected, which means that 1 in 3 Australian men are perpetrators. Right? So we have to get this under control. And the only way we can do it is by standing shoulder to shoulder.
Have to lean into that conversation.
Together. Both genders. Let's lean in.
And opening the door for the conversation both ways. Yeah.
And I think, you know, with men, you talked about how do I go with, you know, some different audiences. And over the years, I've had, you know, I'll walk into a group that's 80% men. And I have no eye contact. They have no one wants to look at me, you know. And, you know, soon in, I start getting some eye contact and whatnot. But I always feel like what a horrible place for non-violent men to sit in. Because you automatically, I don't know how you feel about it. Like, do you know, like it's a horrible place if people automatically think, oh, you're a man, you're violent, or.
Well, it's kind of, and I'm assuming in those circumstances, you know, you'd get some of that communication too. It's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not a violent person, or it can't be everyone, can it? Like, so, you know, these kind of almost, you know, mental, you know, disturbances for you. It's like it's disturbing your vision of the world, like how I see it, and like it can't be that way. It's almost like too much to comprehend or fathom, you know.
And I think, you know, there's a lot of, in the vast ocean of, even though the statistics are horrific, in the vast ocean, in the sea of amazing, incredible men, it's a drop in the ocean that use this antisocial behaviour against the most vulnerable in their
most vulnerable people.
So it's definitely not the majority, you know. It's not the majority, and that's why we have to call it out, because we need to shift it. We need to shift the landscape.
It's not the majority. They're you know, it's like we've got lots of good men, but potentially some of them don't really understand how they can help and influence and change the future. So like when we don't really have the tool, like to tell me how I can do something, you know, some practical things. And you guys are doing some of that amazing work, which is just incredible.
So we aren't funded. We've actually just recently, just the other day, we were given some Commonwealth funding, which is incredible.
Wow. Okay.
Out of the federal drop.
I was going to ask a bit about that. So this probably gives us a good chance to sort of, because I know, you know, with our listeners here, you know, Well Faculty, you know, we talked a little bit about, you know, what's it all about? You know, there's 2 parts to the podcast, and we're going on this adventure, a journey to sort of discover what, you know, true wealth. It's a cliche, but it's what is true wealth for you, or is different to what is true wealth for me, and what are you going to spend and invest your life passion in achieving and helping do? Like you're driven, you're called. Or a bit of both in this journey that you're on right now. But really, so 2 questions, and maybe sort of we'll fill in around it. Is like one, what do you do in your faculties, your mental, emotional, physical faculty? How do you take care of yourself? Because this must be full on. I mean, and the things that you see and experience and so on. Like how do you manage it not pulling you into this dark black hole and you're never escaping?
So it's around sitting in the light, Jace. So sustainability is around sitting in the light. We have to focus our work on new beginnings. Right?
So not looking into the past, looking at something new for the future.
We're changing outcomes. We're, you know, creating fresh new starts, fresh new beginnings. You know, from that marketing angle, you know, my skill base, like you were asking before. For me, the most important thing is that we engage our consumer base, correct? If knowing what the statistics are and how many people are impacted directly or indirectly, it's vast. So the only way, and around a subject where people are more likely to turn their head, right, because it's too confronting, is by providing a hope-filled environment, right? And we shine the light. So,
shine the light on the possibility of the future.
And we don't sit in the darkness of posting. So we're heavily social media driven. You'll see, right? So we're reaching about 600,000 people. So in an idea where we wanted to connect and get people thinking about domestic and family violence, I can tick that because we're connecting them through programs that we've created which enable people to practically get involved without actually ever meeting the families. But I'm connecting you through your lounge or your dining table, and it's not because it's dump.com and you're shifting it off because you don't want it. But you're going to give that to me because you know that it's going to go and help a family.
Go somewhere,
that's impacted by domestic violence. And then the best thing is you get to see it on social media, and there it is in Home 1021.
Nice.
Right? Amazing. So that's kind of the essence behind it. And we're able to keep people engaged because it's not too confronting.
Yes.
Right? That is the most important thing. And so we do sit, yes, it's sad. And, I've got a bit teary because I think about the kids and I'm a mum and, all of those things. And that's the fire in me. I remember very early, I was years ago, Jace, and we were at SeaWorld. We're taking the girls to SeaWorld. And I was emailing, because of course we always work. When do we not work? Dolphin enclosure. It's just ridiculous. And I was emailing a support worker, and she said to me, Jace, I said, how are you going? And she goes, I've had a really bad day. Right? And I said, she said to me, yesterday was a really bad day. That was Saturday morning. And I said, what was happening for you? And she said to me, a little 8-year-old girl from refuge, right? So this is a worker from a refuge, had started school the day before, and all that could be given to her, Jason, was the paint-stained uniform that was left at sick bay. Do you expect that here on the Gold Coast?
No.
Drives me nuts. Drives me nuts, Jace. And at that moment, I felt, how is that even happening? Again, in this lucky country. And it's happening because the demand is massive. The funding, there's not enough beds. It's horrific, in that scope. But the sector doesn't have the resources, Jace. Doesn't have the resources to be buying uniforms.
All of those things.
All of these things. And the most important thing for these children is to have their dignity and self-worth reinstated. Imagine this little girl who's been ripped out of her home, away from her friends and away from her school and her dog and everything she knows. And 3 days later, she's starting at a school where she has nothing but the paint-stained uniform to start school with. Think about that, Jace, about if that was Lily, right? Think about, that's what I think we must always think about. It's not the social, it's not the, the back, no education and all that. These people are us. Okay. So she's this little girl, could be anybody. She's starting school at a time where she's most vulnerable. She doesn't even have her own pencils. Okay. And as far as the teacher might know, that a lot of the teachers don't know if the children are coming through refuge.
They don't. They're not.
Parent the kids safe. This is just another child that has got no resources. I don't think that's acceptable, Jason. I do not think it's acceptable.
So how have you organised the resources that you need to, continue with what you do? I mean, you said the government's been slow to the party for the moment, but it's coming on board now, which is fantastic for you. Tell us a little bit practically about the nuts and boltsy stuff for you, like people donating their furniture and sort of, do you have financial donations, or how does it all work from a nuts and bolts point of view?
I suppose I'm the wing and the prayer, and Gareth is the babe. We have 2 months' money in the bank, So
it's a registered charity. Is it a not for profit?
Absolutely, DGR status and all of that.
So maybe for some of the people listening in, because I know for me, coaching people who want to buy investment property, they don't really not mad about the property. They're mad about the outcome and something into the future, some sort of wealth that they can then do something with. And a lot of people are motivated in maybe a similar way with you, with something that they're passionate or have there's an injustice or something they want to help or fix.
Yeah.
Can you maybe just give us a snapshot on the version of the world, the practical nuts and bolts of that sort of stuff,
Sure.
Turning it into this idea I've got to do something or I'm going to rally the community and then,
So I think the biggest thing is you will encounter so many naysayers, right?
Yeah.
So you really have to have courage.
Yeah.
And we are asking these families to press the restart button on their lives.
Yeah.
And the least that we can do and the least that I can do is have a bit of courage and lean in myself and do everything I can to sort this out and not be quick to throw in the towel. If I was to listen to the people around me, Jason, you know me a long time, I would have this is a bit hard. And, and it's just head down, bum up.
How do you deal with that bit? Like, is it sort of like water off a duck's back now, or still sometimes it's sort of like, really, do you know what I mean? So
it's so funny, Jace. I don't know. I'm a nutter. I don't know.
Driven by passion,
I just feel I'm very determined.
Yeah.
I'm very determined.
Yeah.
I think it would be very different if I didn't have Gareth. I think he is amazing human, as I said before.
Amazing person.
He is there, and he often says, it sounds super corny, but he just wants to lift me to let me fly and just make it happen.
Yeah.
He's amazing. He just supports me 100%. And I think that that's where we need to be with our partners.
100%.
We just need to just support them. And, so I definitely don't think I could have had it. And obviously the kids are so supportive. It's all
so
they've
supportive,
ever known. But, we are, I don't know, Jace. I feel as you go through life, you surround yourselves with the people that uplift you or the people that steal your oxygen.
And that's part of it. The second part of my question here was this, it's not a hand solo thing. This thing's a marathon, not a sprint for you. It's going to be decades of focus and passion.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned Gareth and your family, supporting you and lifting you up when sometimes you haven't got the energy to lift yourself up.
Yeah.
Who are the other people? And it doesn't have to be names, but types of people that have helped you, what I would call your wealth faculty, the people you rely on, advisors, supporters, waving flags, whatever it is. Like, who are those people that have helped you to where you are now and going to help you into the future?
Yeah, so I have a couple of incredible mentors that I've known for 10 years.
Nice.
Okay?
Yeah.
These are frontline workers. Frontline workers who one of them works in northern Brisbane, ex-army. She is a dynamite person, and she works with the highest women at the highest risk of lethality. Right? That's her everyday job. I have never met anybody like that in my life. I think she is just an incredible human being. She has taught me everything that I know, her and another woman who runs a refuge. And those are my, those are, I don't know what you'd call them.
Inner circle, confidence, mentors, inspiring people. Yeah.
And then, as I was saying before, I'm really passionate about a collective, right? And I think the thing that I've learned through COVID is that I'm not very good at asking for help. Okay, so that's my weakness, actually.
Right.
Because I'm always very positive and upbeat, and I'm going to do this.
We'll do this thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I find it difficult to ask for help because I do things. I'm a doer. So that was a big lesson. So being able to be a little bit more honest around that for me.
Yeah.
And I do feel it can be lonely, for me. I do feel sometimes I feel a bit lonely in terms of I'm in a very unique position, Jace.
Yeah. It's not like, I don't know, so what do you do at a barbecue or a party or something like that, and people go, oh, righto. What do I say to that? It's not like, I work in accounts at
I think it's more,
I know what you're saying, because I certainly, as an entrepreneur, there's a saying, it's lonely at the top, and that's just the way they like it. It can be. Yeah, sometimes you want to be left alone.
Yeah, I know.
But
Don't talk to me after a day.
Yeah.
But in saying it's a unique type of loneliness for me, because I feel I'm a massive people person.
Yeah.
And I have a big team, 465 volunteers. My core team, I've got coordinators and all of that, and an incredible homes manager, and they've been with me since the beginning, Jace.
Yeah.
We have almost 100% retention. I think
wow.
98% retention. It's crazy. It's not crazy. It's like amazing.
Well, people believe in the cause, right? I mean, at the end of the day,
they are there. They're enjoying
values-based, believing, changing the world.
And they feel valued.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We have an incredibly supportive, because they are my priority. Those people in my team are first and foremost my priority.
You support your people, and your people support the people 100%. That you believe. Yeah.
And if we can't get our own microcosm right, what is the point of what we're doing? So we have an incredibly healthy microcosm.
Fantastic.
And there's all sorts of fish, and it's all happening.
Yeah.
And it's around being able to. We work from a trauma-informed framework. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No, I haven't heard of that. No.
So it's around being able to identify and appreciate the lived trauma that people have experienced. And I feel like this is coming from a corporate world.
Yeah.
All right. It's something that's very important where
you've got to give some framework for the conversation or the ideas, or
having empathy and understanding.
Yeah.
In a normal work environment, you might come to work and Sally is moody and she's erratic and she's difficult to deal with, and all of this.
Yeah.
Working from a trauma-informed framework gives you permission to acknowledge that there's a lens of empathy, right?
Yeah.
So understanding that she might have lived through some trauma, and what that trauma has done has impacted her behaviour and through her trauma behaviours. It's called trauma behaviours. So when you bring this back to all the statistics around domestic and family violence and what it does to the physicality, it has long-lasting effects, Jace. So
huge long-lasting effects,
finish a domestic relationship, a violent relationship, and move on.
Well, it's post PTSD, right? So post-traumatic stress disorder.
100%.
One of the books that I read, a guy called Sean Accor, and I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head right now, but I'll remember it. A small amount of negative media in the morning, like 15 minutes, releases so much cortisol and adrenaline into your body that it drops your intellect between 50 and 80%. So imagine, and not in a good way, imagine having some sort of physical violent activity. Like, what's that going to do to your chemistry?
And then think about the children as well that are experiencing that. And we know through refuge, most, if not all of the children that are sitting in a refuge right now have come in under the academic average for their age.
Yeah.
There's high levels of absenteeism. The children are just not connecting. They're not sleeping. They're not retaining. These are children, it's horrific. Anyway, so going back to that whole trauma-informed lens, and I invite everybody, I think the more people that know about that trauma-informed framework, I think it really impacts your work environment.
Well, a great framework to have that,
It's a great framework, because you can actually go, it's definitely not, it doesn't give you permission to be badly behaved and to be an idiot.
Yeah.
You definitely draw the line because it's not respectful or whatever, but it definitely gives you more of a lens of empathy, which I think we should all sit in, which will then lend ourselves to be a bit more respectful to one another.
Yeah. So like a what's going on, are you okay? Starting of a conversation rather than, what's wrong with you? Get yourself, a different way of going
just
about
a different way of
that conversation.
And just thinking about them rather than thinking about yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's probably another 2 hours worth of conversation, maybe even more. So, but it's been amazing today to have a chat with you, buddy. Really appreciate it, and you're doing something that is just phenomenal, and keep it going, And if for anyone listening in right now, and if they want to support in one way, shape, or another, they go and check you guys out, Facebook, websites, riseup.com.
We've just launched the Change 5,000 campaign.
Mm-hmm.
People are often like, what can we do? And we don't think, twice about sort of donating overseas and whatnot.
Yes.
And we really struggle with the finances, just going back to that, to really engage people, because what people don't understand is we operate out of, just in Queensland, southeast Queensland, we have 33 storage units.
Is that right?
So we don't have a centralised facility. We have just completed our 1,042nd family support. So that's fully furnished homes.
So just practically, right? How big is that 33 storage units? I'm just thinking 6 by 4. And then what would that be in square metres? Gee, I'd do the mathematics, thousands of square metres of space, yeah?
Yeah, and we can't, going back to hubby or Tight Tuesdays, I like to chat.
Yeah.
He'll say to me, babe, we can't, as a little family, we can't go and get a lease for $500,000 over 5 years. We don't have a product to sell, Jace.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's too much liability for Gareth and I and our little family.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have any ongoing income hitting the account.
Yeah.
Whereas if we can get these little, it's not very effective. Gareth's a Tetris champion, but it's incredibly ineffective.
Yeah.
I always say to my team, let's not focus on what we don't have right now. Let me worry about that.
Yeah.
But imagine what we will achieve when we do have it.
Yeah.
So when we have a centralised storage facility, imagine, Jason, it's nuts. So,
So if we were to do a shout out right now into the property space, because a lot of people in property are listening in right now.
Yeah.
If you were looking for something amazing, what would it be? 5,000, 10,000 square metres of storage, something like that, like a big shed, because hopefully people listening in saying, well, maybe they can't physically do something, but they could.
If anyone's got, we often say, gosh, if anyone's got an empty facility that they'd like to do some tax depreciation on or something like that, give it to us.
Do you know, just practically, do you know the answer to that question? If they were donating some of that stuff?
Absolutely.
I would love to get some more information from you about that because I'll put a call out to this network because I think this network could probably help you in that space.
I just feel, there's lots that people can do. The other thing is Change 5,000. We're trying to reach 5,000 people to each donate $2 a week, right? So that's $8 a month, $96 a year, something like that.
That's great.
If we reach 5,000 people to do that, Jace, it will change our ending.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's, we're so focused on getting this done. People don't realise they always want to donate the pretty pillow that goes on the couch.
Yeah.
The reality is that
$2 a week. $2 a week can help.
It needs a couch. How does the couch get there? It goes in the truck. How do we put petrol in the truck?
Yeah.
What about the storage? So we're paying that storage. It probably costs us about $50,000 a year on storage.
In storage, yeah.
So, but we always say at least if things get tough, like we've just through COVID, we've just knocked off 3 of the sheds, to cut our
expenses down.
Yeah. So, and the other interesting thing around COVID is that in May we had our highest intake of volunteers.
Is that right?
And we had 55 volunteers join us. And I think what that really says to me, Jace, is that Australians are amazing and that's true Aussie spirit.
Yeah.
We're all really suffering and we're facing some sort of uncertainty and pandemic that we've never faced or encountered.
Yeah.
But there is a real core people here in Australia who will go, you know what, but there are people that are much worse off than me.
Yeah, let me help.
What we can do.
Yeah.
But so
good Aussie spirit.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Old Aussie spirit. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic, mate. Well, listen, it's been amazing to have a chat with you today.
Made you cry.
Yeah, well, I thought I was going to have some tears there, but it's certainly something that's very, having a daughter, having a mum, having sisters, those sorts of things. When you talk in that sort of sense, it brings it very close to home, and also as a man too, I'm very aware that some of the behaviours that I might display to my sons, out of context could give permission in just not a great way. So it's something that is super, super important and something that,
We just have to give our kids permission and especially our sons and we as dads, we need to challenge toxic masculinity.
Absolutely.
And you've heard of all of that.
Oh, listen, part of the reason I ended up on my journey was this very thing. I used to work at a boys' school in Sydney, Knox Grammar School, and I had some pretty long and in-depth chats with lots of good teachers in that space, saying, how toxic some of that sporting behaviour and all of these other things were, in that space. So, yeah, certainly.
And we
certainly.
need to, boys need to be able to show their emotions. We have the highest levels of youth suicide.
Youth suicide, right?
Boys.
Yeah.
So
number one killer of men, hands down.
100%.
So we got this pain at two ends of the spectrum. Yeah.
Totally. Men who are struggling to effectively communicate their feelings. It's building up in them. There's, and it goes back to that whole hunting, gathering, and it's just terrible. So we just need to all do our best, be aware of it, lean in, and change some endings. Good way to maybe wind up the conversation today. But what we usually do is we do list a little quick fire. I say something, you say an answer. Sure.
So quick fire questions.
Okay.
Maybe a bit of fun just to sort of finish it off. So quick fire, money is?
What?
Money is?
Oh, God. You see, it's not on my front of mind, is it? Clearly.
Which is awesome. Money is needed.
Yeah,
maybe needed.
Yes. Exactly.
Women are?
Strong.
Men are?
Strong.
Children are?
Inspiring.
Domestic violence is?
Devastating.
Your favourite food?
Ooh, what is my favourite food? Gareth makes a really mean rice noodle and vegetable dish. So that's up there, actually.
Gareth's food. Yeah, all of Gareth's food. When he cooks, it's my favourite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he does all the cooking in the house. He's amazing.
Favourite destination for you to travel to?
Paris.
Ooh la la.
Yeah, ooh la la.
Guilty pleasure?
Spending time with Gareth, actually. It's a bit corny, isn't it?
It's beautiful. I love it. Hey, buddy, well, thank you. Really appreciate things and you're inspiring and keep up the awesome work. And
Thanks for having me. What a pleasure.
Mate, thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us on The Wealth Faculty. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe. Where all good podcasts are found, you can find us there. And if you want to watch it, you can subscribe on YouTube, Positive Mentor TV. And until the next episode, take care. Bye for now.